my name is Calvin Goom. I'm the VP of EMEA for a company called LeapXpert.
Fantastic. And what is your role at LeapXpert?
As I said, VP of EMEA, responsible for setting up the entire operation across the EMEA region. So starting the business, building the business, growing the business, recruiting the people, developing the brand, winning the customer base, and growing market share.
Fantastic. And so secure messaging services, why is messaging such an important thing in today's day and age?
Well, it's pervasive. There's 1.5 trillion messages being sent around the world every year. That's expected to double over the next 5 years. Less than 20% of that is business-related content. So at some point in time, businesses will wake up to the fact that this channel is a pervasive channel of choice and how most people prefer to communicate with each other, both on a personal level and now at a business level.
So you use the word pervasive. Would you please go into a bit more detail on what you mean by pervasive? And I assume you mean some of the more common channels that people are using day to day to communicate within business.
Preference. So, if you think about a certain demographic, most people of your age would prefer to communicate over channels like WhatsApp or Telegram rather than picking up the telephone and making a call or receiving and sending an email. So that's what I mean by pervasive. It's preference of people in terms of their natural behaviours around how they prefer to communicate.
An inherent part of the technology that you guys are using is the security and making sure that everything is protected. But how is that? How do you guys specifically ensure that that security and everyone's data is perfectly secure?
Well, a lot of the responsibility for that is with the providers of the messaging channels. So people like Meta, who own WhatsApp, they provide the encryption on the actual message itself. Our job is we are facilitating a business user to be able to communicate with his client. The client could be on any platform, whether that's WhatsApp, WeChat, iMessage. That's up to the client. That's the client's preference. But for the business user, he needs to know who he's connecting with, not what channel to use. So what we're doing from a security point of view is ensuring the authentic connection. So this employee knows that he's talking to the right person at the other end of this messaging platform and vice versa. His client knows that he's talking to the correct person in the bank, and it's a proper authentic communication. There's too much scamming and phishing going on in the marketplace, so you've got to protect both sides of the conversation in that regard.
And I think with working at home in the pandemic, has that naturally increased, or how has that affected your business in terms of your approach and the need for a channel and the security?
I think everybody is recognizing and adopting more and more electronic channels of communication and collaboration, whether that's technologies like Microsoft Teams, which we integrate into, or Slack or Zoom or WebEx. All of these technologies are there to improve the way that people communicate and collaborate inside an organization. What we do is take that and extend it outside the organization. So suddenly now employees can communicate externally to their clients over these preferred pervasive messaging channels.
You were mentioning briefly channels such as WeChat. Has there been a difference in incorporating that, especially because of the different areas of the world? So adopting one in China as opposed to one from the US?
Massive difference, but that's all down to personal preference. So the different demographics within different countries have different preferences of their channels. So Japan, they use Line, for example. You mentioned WeChat, that's the most dominant messaging platform in China. WhatsApp is common in Europe, however, Signal, for example, is used a lot in France. iMessage is the most common platform in North America. And we've just recently announced support for iMessage, for example. And then you've got the crypto community, for example, and they're using platforms like Telegram or Discord. So you've got all these different channels used by different countries or a demographic of user community. So we've had to get regulatory approval and support from, for all of these platforms, all of these channels in all of these countries to ensure efficacy of our solution and to ensure that our target customers in the financial services community know that our product, our solution is and has got regulatory approval.
And you mentioned the financial services community specifically. Do you think that this will, in 5-10 years' time, be expanded to all areas of business?
Without question. Without question. We see the financial services industry as the tip of the iceberg right now. Mainly because the amount of regulatory pressure that's being put on these financial institutions by the SEC or the FCA, you know, about from the regulators, requiring every single financial institution to have communications monitoring compliance within their architecture, their design, the way they work and the way they operate. So it's, you know, we've got a window of opportunity right now for all financial institutions to become compliant in that regard. However, if you think about the use of messaging, you know, it's been used broadly across all industries and across all segments of industries. If you think about the public sector, you know, Boris Johnson, for example, for the last 6 months, he's been under a huge amount of pressure for certain things that have been going on, whether that's organising the parties or the redecoration of his flat, for example. All of the scrutiny came from his WhatsApp communication, right? These are now conversations that are public record, but they're not capturing that information. They're not ensuring that these communications are being monitored for people in the public servants. Recent announcement about the police force. So a police officer went to a crime scene and videoed the crime scene and shared it amongst his friends, and it went viral. Yeah, all being shared over WhatsApp. So the police commissioners came back and said, how are we going to stop this kind of activity from happening? How do we drive an improvement in digital conduct, considering that these messaging channels are so pervasive and so easy to use and so easy to share? And that's just in the public sector. Then you look at the private sector. You know, other members of the private, whether that's the petrochemical or retail or pharmaceutical, considering how many messages are being sent every single day around the world, not many of these brands, global brands or small brands for that matter, have woken up to the power of these channels, what they could do for them. Their ability to reach a new audience or a target audience. How could they monetize these channels to drive, I don't know, product promotion, improvements in customer service, some other form of incentive program, ways to drive and increase their revenue, their launching a new product offering. Who knows what these could be? But suddenly, if they can integrate their business processes, their workflows, their sales and marketing tools, their CRM functions into these channels, they've now extending their reach. They're now able to access existing or new clients in a new way, but in a channel, you know, in a rich messaging channel that their target client wants to use and wants to communicate on.
So, looking at your own organization, what is the cutting edge that you guys offer? What separates you from the rest?
There's probably three things. First of all, we provide a single pane of glass into any channel that our customers' clients want to use. So if you're a banker, for example, you don't want to have multiple channels on your device, on your mobile phone, right? But you want to be able to communicate with people who are in different geographies, in different countries, using different channels. So our first point is that we provide that single pane of glass to enable the bank employee, for example, to communicate with anybody, whether they're on WeChat, Line, Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, iMessage, it doesn't matter. The second thing, we've got to govern that channel. So once the communication channel has been established, you've got to govern it. How do you stop people from using it for market abuse purposes or inappropriate language? Things that are breaking the regulatory requirements and the compliance requirements that these organizations, the financial institutions, are being put under. How do you ensure it's authentic? How do you ensure it's secure? So that's the second tenet, is we govern and secure and authenticate that channel. And thirdly, how do you then integrate it into a bigger collaboration story? So most of these financial institutions that we're selling to and that we're working with have already made massive investments in technologies like Microsoft Teams or Slack or WebEx or Zoom. So rather than having to introduce an alternative product into their organization, we've now established a way of integrating into those technologies. So from a user experience within the bank, all they are having to do is use Teams or use Slack or use WebEx or use Zoom as their method of communicating to their clients over these enterprise messaging channels.
Do you think that because there is no change, is the interface just as simple as it looks completely identical? Do you think that the customer is aware in that sense?
The customer being the banker? Or not at all. He's not aware at all. Because at the end of the day, we provide a native experience. So he's, for example, in Microsoft Teams, you set up the Teams desktop exactly the same. It's operating, you've got the contacts down the left-hand side. You click on your contact, you type them a message. Our system, working in conjunction with Teams, knows where to send that message to and over what channel. So it's a completely native experience for the banker and a completely native experience for the client he's communicating to. Because the client receives the message in WhatsApp or Line or Signal or Telegram or WeChat or doesn't matter. And he responds within that application and it comes back into the banker's inbox in Teams. So he doesn't know any different, doesn't see any difference. So as a consequence, the barrier of adoption for the banks of our technology is as small as possible, which is really important because they can then embrace the use of these rich messaging channels and encourage their employees to use them as a formal, approved, secure, governed way of communicating with their clients in full regulatory compliance.